30 people are coming tomorrow, and you'll have everything ready by 4 a.m. That was the casual demand Emily heard from her father 3 days before Thanksgiving. He said it like he was ordering takeout, not assigning her a 12-hour marathon of chopping, roasting, basting, and serving a feast fit for a banquet hall. She stared at him, the list of names in her trembling hand. 30. Not 20, not even the 23 she'd somehow managed years before. 30 guests with special requests, picky eaters, and last-minute plus-ones her relatives thoughtlessly piled onto her shoulders. Emily felt her pulse quicken, her throat tighten. For 18 years, she'd carried this burden. Since she was a teenager, she had been the chef of Thanksgiving, not because she chose it, but because one accident had shoved her into that role. Her mother had broken her wrist. Her family had praised Emily for saving the day. And somehow, that one desperate act became her permanent destiny. Now she was 34. Her back ached from years of marathon cooking sessions. Her friends always spent their holidays laughing, sharing dishes, playing games. Meanwhile, she cried over turkeys, missed conversations, and ate her meals standing by the counter like hired staff. The injustice was suffocating. Worse than the work was the way her family treated her, like she owed them perfection. The turkey was always a little dry. The stuffing was too salty. The desserts, not like Aunt Marie's. It was never gratitude, only expectation, only entitlement. Emily's fingers curled tighter around the paper. Her father was still talking, throwing in extra requests. Vegetarian options for a new girlfriend, plain pasta for picky kids, dairy-free desserts for an aunt's new diet. His voice droned, but inside her head, something snapped. For 18 years, she had played their game. But this year would be different. Before we dive into this explosive story of family pressure, betrayal, and ultimate revenge, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment. What would you do if your family treated you like their personal chef? Emily was only 16 the first time it happened. 2 days before Thanksgiving, her mother had broken her wrist, slumping into a recliner with a bottle of prescription painkillers and a sigh. "Emily can handle it," her mother announced casually, as if peeling potatoes occasionally had magically prepared her teenage daughter to cook a full feast for 23 relatives. The words stuck. Emily can handle it. She stayed up until 3 in the morning, crying over burnt rolls, scrambling to fix the turkey that cooked unevenly, and trying to make the mashed potatoes smooth without lumps. She missed the laughter in the living room, missed her cousins playing board games, missed everything that made Thanksgiving a holiday. When the meal was finally served, edible but imperfect, everyone praised her. "Sarah's stuffing was so good. You're so lucky to have such a capable daughter." Her parents beamed as if they had trained her personally. That single year of desperation became expectation. By the following Thanksgiving, Emily was no longer a helper. She was the chef. "She did such a wonderful job last year. Let's just let her handle it again." And so the pattern cemented itself. Each year, the guest list grew. Cousins married, children were born, friends were invited. What had once been a frantic teenage rescue became a permanent duty. By her 20s, Thanksgiving meant exhaustion, not celebration. She spent her holidays chopping, basting, stirring, and plating while everyone else relaxed with wine or football. The praise that had once felt good turned sour. Relatives stopped offering to help entirely, insisting they didn't want to get in her way. They'd wander into the kitchen to sneak a bite, offer a critique, and then vanish when she actually asked for assistance. Emily felt herself vanish too. She wasn't a daughter, sister, or cousin during the holidays. She was a one-woman catering service. Her family branded it as tradition, but what it really was exploitation disguised as love. Every year she told herself it would be different. Every year she swallowed her resentment, telling herself she was needed, that this was love, that her usefulness meant she belonged. But inside, something hollow grew. By the time she was 34, that hollow had become rage, and the final spark to set it ablaze was coming soon. One Thanksgiving demand too many. Because the year her father casually handed her a list of 32 names just days before the holiday was the year Emily decided enough was enough. By her mid-20s, Emily was already a seasoned soldier in the Thanksgiving battlefield. Her cooking wasn't just expected, it was demanded. Relatives boasted about Emily's famous stuffing and Emily's perfect gravy. But their praise was hollow because it came with a price. Endless labor, zero gratitude. The cracks began to show in subtle ways. One year, her cousin arrived with a new boyfriend who handed Emily a handwritten list of his allergies and foods he didn't like. The cousin smiled sweetly. "You don't mind making a few changes, do you? It's Thanksgiving. He should feel included." Emily wanted to scream. She didn't even know this man. Why should she rearrange her entire menu for a stranger who wouldn't to remember her name in a year? But she bit her tongue and added another layer of stress to her already crushing schedule. Another year, her brother E.'s wife announced she was going gluten-free and expected Emily to prepare duplicate versions of every single dish. "It's part of my health journey," she said, making Emily the villain for hesitating. And always the commentary came, "The turkey was a little dry last year. Could you make the stuffing less salty this time? Aunt Marie's rolls were better, but yours are fine." Every critique chipped away at Emily's spirit. She wasn't family anymore. She was hired help without the paycheck. The only difference was that real catering staff got days off. She never did. Meanwhile, the guest list ballooned. 32 people. 32 mouths, each with their own special requests, each expecting a restaurant-quality meal delivered seamlessly by one exhausted woman. And when Emily dared to ask for help, they brushed her off. "We'd only mess it up. You're so good at this. Why would we get in your way?" The truth burned like acid. It wasn't that they couldn't help. It was that they didn't want to. Why lift a finger when Emily would shoulder the entire burden alone? And so Thanksgiving became a performance, not a celebration. Emily played the role of master chef while her family lounged in the living room, sipping wine, watching football, and laughing at jokes she never heard. She ate her meal standing at the counter, scraping pans and stacking dishes, her smile stretched thin, her eyes raw from tears shed in the pantry. She told herself it was love. She told herself it was tradition. But deep down, she knew the truth. It wasn't love. It was exploitation wrapped in pretty words. Because the year her father handed her that list of 32 names, Emily finally let the words slip. "I mind." And from that moment, there was no going back. It happened 3 days before Thanksgiving. Emily was in her kitchen, surrounded by stacks of recipe cards and grocery lists, when her father walked in with a folded sheet of paper. He handed it to her with a casual smile, the way someone might hand over a shopping coupon. 32 this year, he said. "Some folks are bringing friends. I told them you wouldn't mind." Emily unfolded the paper. Names stared back at her. 32 mouths, some of them strangers she had never even met. She blinked hard, her pulse pounding in her ears. "I do mind," she said quietly. Her father paused. "What?" "I mind," she repeated louder this time. "I can't cook for 32 people with 3 days' notice." For a moment, the room froze. Her father looked at her as if she'd just spoken a foreign language. "But you've always handled it before. You've managed everything we've thrown at you. What's different now?" What was different? Everything. Emily was 34 years old, with nearly 2 decades of lost holidays behind her. She had never once sat at the table without worrying about oven schedules or whether the turkey would dry out. She had never laughed with her cousins during football games or lingered over dessert with her grandparents. She had been the backbone of their Thanksgiving, yet treated like invisible staff. "I need help," Emily said, her voice trembling but firm. "Real help. Not people wandering in to taste test while I do all the work. I can't keep doing this alone." Her father frowned, baffled. "Well, you know how it is. Everyone has their own traditions. It's easier if you just handle it." "Easier for who?" Emily snapped. "Certainly not for me." That Thanksgiving was a disaster. She tried to push through, but her resentment boiled over. She snapped at relatives when they criticized, cried in the pantry as the turkey rested, and served dinner with red eyes and a smile that fooled no one. Later, her parents whispered about her attitude problem, insisting she needed to learn how to manage stress better. In their eyes, the problem wasn't the crushing workload. The problem was that Emily dared to be human under the weight of it. That night, lying in bed, she realized something life-altering. Her family would never change, not unless she forced them to. And for the first time, Emily started imagining what it would feel like to walk away. Because Emily didn't just imagine walking away. She took it to therapy, where the seeds of her quiet rebellion began to grow. The breaking point left scars Emily couldn't ignore. That night, when she collapsed into bed after serving 32 ungrateful relatives, her chest ached with resentment. She wasn't just exhausted, she was hollow. For 18 years, she had traded her own joy for a holiday that never felt like hers. In January, she finally picked up the phone and called a therapist. It was something she had avoided for years, brushing off her anger as stress, telling herself this was simply tradition. But deep down, she knew she was trapped in something far darker, a cycle of exploitation disguised as family love. The first session was quiet. Emily struggled to put her feelings into words. But when she finally did, the truth poured out like floodwater. She described the endless shopping trips, the 4 a.m. wake-ups, the turkey timing charts taped to her fridge, the relatives who drifted into the kitchen only to sample food and leave again. She described the tears she shed behind pantry doors, hiding her misery so no one would feel guilty. Her therapist listened, then asked one simple question. "Do you actually enjoy cooking for them?" Emily froze. "I used to," she admitted, "when it felt like a gift. But now, no. Now it feels like an obligation I can't escape." The therapist nodded. "What do you think would happen if you said no?" Emily laughed bitterly. "They'd be angry. They'd guilt me. Thanksgiving would be ruined, and they'd say it was all my fault." "And what if it was?" The therapist pressed gently. "What if Thanksgiving was ruined? What would actually happen?" Emily blinked. The question rattled her. She pictured it. Her family, scrambling without her, eating canned food, maybe even skipping the holiday altogether. It sounded chaotic, but survivable. Life would go on. Her therapist leaned forward. "The truth is, Emily, you've been conditioned to believe your worth comes from what you provide. But love isn't earned by overwork. And boundaries aren't betrayal. What if you gave yourself permission to choose how you want your holidays to look?" For the first time in years, Emily's breath didn't feel trapped in her lungs. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to cry. She wanted freedom. That day, she left therapy with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. She began practicing small boundaries, saying no to little requests, ignoring guilt trips, reminding herself that her presence at family gatherings was a choice, not an obligation. And as the next Thanksgiving crept closer, Emily made a promise. This time, she wouldn't sacrifice herself. Because when November arrived and her father casually dropped the list of 30 guests again, Emily's response shocked everyone, including herself. By the time autumn leaves began to fall, Emily felt the old weight pressing down again. Thanksgiving was weeks away, and like clockwork, her phone buzzed with the familiar call. Her father's voice was cheerful, oblivious. 30 people this year, Emily. You'll have everything ready by 4 a.m., right? Oh, and Uncle Bob's bringing his new girlfriend. She's vegetarian, so make sure there are plenty of options. And Jennifer's kids are all picky, so maybe make some plain pasta just in case. Emily closed her eyes, her grip on the phone tightening. For a moment, the old instinct to agree, to please, rose in her throat. But therapy had changed something. She no longer heard love in his words, only entitlement. That night, she sat at her kitchen table with her notebook open. Menu plans, shopping lists, oven schedules, all the same patterns she had followed for 18 years. Her pen hovered over the paper, but her hand refused to move. The thought hit her like lightning. I don't want to do this. Not anymore. The next morning, she pushed a grocery cart through the supermarket aisles, the fluorescent lights buzzing above her. She picked up cranberries, yams, flour, and a frozen turkey, piling them high like a soldier preparing for battle. But as she reached for another bag of potatoes, her hand trembled. Her chest tightened. She could already see it. The endless chopping, the tears shed in silence, the fake smiles as relatives critiqued her food. Another holiday where she was invisible. Another holiday stolen. Emily froze. Her cart was overflowing, but her heart was screaming. She wasn't choosing this. She was surrendering. And in that moment, she let go. She stepped away from the cart, just left it there, abandoned between the aisles of canned goods and holiday shoppers. Her legs carried her out of the store faster than she realized, her breath coming in sharp bursts. When she reached the parking lot, she pulled out her phone and dialed her best friend. "Are you doing anything for Thanksgiving?" Emily asked, her voice unsteady. "Flying to Portland to visit my sister," her friend replied. "Why?" "Can I come with you?" There was a pause, then laughter. "Of course, but what about your family's big dinner? Aren't you supposed to be cooking for 50 people? Emily smiled for the first time in days, the tension in her chest unraveling. 30. And no, I'm not cooking for anyone this year. Booking a last-minute flight was expensive, but when Emily clicked confirm, it felt less like a purchase and more like freedom. Because when her father called the night before Thanksgiving with his usual final details, Emily finally told him the truth, and his reaction was explosive. It was the night before Thanksgiving when the phone rang. Emily saw her father's name glowing on the screen. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, but her pulse quickened and she answered. "Cooking starts at 4 a.m., right?" he asked without a greeting. His voice was brisk, businesslike, as though she were an employee instead of his daughter. "Oh, and don't forget Uncle Bob's girlfriend is vegetarian. Plenty of options for her, and the kids will need plain pasta. I'm sure you've got it all planned." Emily's heart hammered. She tightened her grip on the phone. "Actually, Dad," she said slowly, "I won't be cooking tomorrow." The silence on the line stretched long enough to make her stomach twist. Finally, he barked out a laugh. "Very funny. Now seriously, what's the plan?" "I'm not cooking," Emily repeated, her voice firm this time. "I'm going out of town." The laughter died instantly. "What do you mean, out of town? 30 people are expecting dinner." "Then 30 people will have to figure out something else," Emily replied. "I'm not abandoning family, Dad. I'm abandoning a role I never agreed to play. I'm done being the unpaid caterer." His tone shifted from disbelief to anger. "How could you be so selfish? Didn't you think about what this will do to your mother? To the family? You can't just walk away. Thanksgiving depends on you." Emily swallowed, her therapist's words echoing in her head. "Boundaries aren't betrayal." She kept her voice calm. "No, Thanksgiving doesn't depend on me. Families across the country manage without one person doing everything. You could order catering. You could make it a potluck. You could even go to a restaurant. There are options, but I won't sacrifice myself again." Her father's voice cracked with panic. "Emily, please, everyone's counting on you. You're the only one who can do this right." Emily's chest ached, but she didn't waver. "Everyone's been counting on me to ruin my holiday for 18 years. That's not fair, and I'm done." Before he could cycle into another round of guilt trips and desperate pleas, she ended the call. The screen went dark. Her hands shook, but inside, a quiet strength bloomed. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, she had said no, and meant it. Because while Emily boarded her flight the next morning with a sense of freedom, back home, her family was descending into chaos without her. At 3 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning, Emily wasn't basting a turkey or chopping vegetables. She was sliding into the backseat of an Uber, her suitcase at her side. The streets were dark and quiet, but her heart pounded with something new. Freedom. As her plane lifted off a few hours later, Emily pressed her forehead to the cold window. Below her, the city shrank into patches of light and shadow. For the first time in 18 years, she wasn't chained to a kitchen timer. She was free to breathe, to laugh, to live her own holiday. Back home, however, the scene was chaos. By noon, relatives began arriving at her parents' house, chatting cheerfully, expecting the usual aroma of roasting turkey and buttery rolls. Instead, they walked into silence. The counters were bare, the oven cold. "Where's Emily?" someone asked. Her father's jaw clenched. "She's not here." The whispers spread quickly. Plates were set out with nothing to fill them. Children whined for food. Adults grumbled. When they realized there was no meal waiting, panic erupted. Aunt Marie rummaged through the pantry, pulling out dusty cans of vegetables. Cousin Jennifer tried to boil pasta, only to burn it into a sticky mess. Someone suggested ordering catering, but every restaurant was closed for the holiday. By 3 p.m., the supposed grand feast had devolved into a sad hodgepodge of store-bought turkey slices, instant mashed potatoes, canned green beans, and frozen pies barely thawed in time. "This is a disaster," Uncle Bob muttered, stabbing at his plate. "Worst Thanksgiving ever." Her father, red-faced with embarrassment, muttered, "She ruined it. Emily ruined Thanksgiving." But not everyone agreed. Her cousin Mark shook his head. "No, she didn't. We ruined it. We took her for granted for years. Did any of us ever actually help her? No, we expected her to slave away while we sat on the couch." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Meanwhile, Emily sat at a small, cozy table in Portland with just 8 people. She brought a bottle of wine, helped with cleanup, and laughed over board games. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, she was part of the celebration instead of trapped behind it. And while her phone buzzed with dozens of angry, desperate messages, she let it sit untouched. Because this year, she had chosen herself. Because once the dust settled, the family had to face the fallout, and some surprising truths began to emerge in the weeks that followed. When Emily finally turned her phone back on the Friday after Thanksgiving, the screen lit up with 47 unread messages. Some were furious, dripping with blame. Others were guilt-laced, pleading with her to explain herself. A few were even manipulative, accusing her of abandoning family during the one holiday meant to bring everyone together. But buried in the noise were voices she hadn't expected. Her cousin Mark. "I never realized how much work you did. I'm sorry we all took you for granted. Honestly, I respect you for standing up for yourself." Her Aunt Linda. "I understand why you needed a break. We should have helped years ago. I hope you'll give us another chance." And the most surprising of all, her brother. "Mom and Dad are furious, but I'm proud of you. Someone had to say no." Emily read those words with tears in her eyes. For so long, she had been the one holding everything together, the silent backbone of a holiday that drained her dry. Now, by walking away, she had forced everyone to see the truth. Thanksgiving had never been about family. It had been about convenience. Over the next few weeks, the family fractured. Some relatives stopped speaking to her altogether, still seething over the disaster she had caused. These were the ones who had only valued her labor, not her presence. Without her cooking, they had no use for her. But others reached out in small but meaningful ways. Invitations to smaller gatherings appeared, ones where cooking duties were shared, where everyone brought a dish, where Emily was a guest instead of staff. For the first time, she felt like family, not furniture. Her parents were the slowest to come around. They felt humiliated by the ruined Thanksgiving, embarrassed that relatives had whispered about how poorly they'd handled the crisis. In their minds, Emily had betrayed them. Conversations were tense, sharp, filled with accusations. "We never asked you to cook for everyone," her mother argued during one particularly heated call. Emily's voice was steady. "You didn't have to ask. You expected it. And I delivered. For 18 years. But you seem to enjoy it," her mother protested weakly. "I enjoyed being appreciated," Emily said. "I never enjoyed being taken for granted." The silence on the line was heavy. For the first time, her parents didn't have a quick comeback, and slowly, painfully, the truth began to sink in. Because what happened next reshaped every future holiday, proving that sometimes the most radical act of love is learning how to say no. 3 years later, Thanksgiving looked nothing like it once had. Gone were the marathon cooking sessions, the endless lists, the swollen guest counts. Gone was Emily, sweating alone in the kitchen while everyone else laughed in the living room. Now, Thanksgiving was smaller, more intimate, more real. The family dinners that survived were potlucks, everyone contributing something, everyone sharing the work. Aunt Linda brought pies. Cousin Mark handled the potatoes. Emily? She cooked only what she wanted, a dish or two she enjoyed preparing. For the first time in her adult life, she actually sat at the table when the food was served. She actually tasted her own meal while it was still warm. Not everyone adjusted. Some relatives stopped coming altogether, their absence loud but telling. They hadn't wanted family. They had wanted free catering. Without Emily's sacrifice, they drifted away. Her parents eventually softened. After many hard conversations, they began to understand, maybe for the first time, that their daughter E.S. worth wasn't measured by how many plates she filled. It was measured by her presence, her laughter, her choice to be there. And Emily herself? She built new traditions. Some years she joined her family for the potluck. Other years she flew to Portland with her best friend, sipping wine at a table where laughter mattered more than perfect gravy. She had reclaimed the holiday, reshaped it into something that gave her joy instead of stealing it. Looking back, Emily realized that her rebellion hadn't destroyed Thanksgiving. It had saved it. She had forced her family to confront the imbalance they'd ignored for nearly 2 decades. The ones who truly cared adapted. The ones who didn't revealed themselves. And for the first time, she understood something powerful. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to let them take advantage of you. Boundaries weren't betrayal, they were survival. Emily's kitchen was no longer a prison. Her holidays were no longer a burden. And that freedom? It was worth more than any perfectly roasted turkey. Traditions should bring joy, not chains. Emily's story proves that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Because sometimes, saying no is the only way to make space for love that's real. Now I want to hear from you. What is the boldest boundary you've ever set with your family? Drop it in the comments below, hit that like button if this story kept you hooked, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice, betrayal, and redemption.